I feel like everyone has that one weird game they found as a kid that nobody else had played or really heard of. For me, it was a game known as From the Abyss, a dungeon crawler action RPG developed by Sonic Powered on the Nintendo DS, and I'd be willing to wager I was the only kid in South Carolina that had a copy of this game at the time, because no one had heard of it outside of some of the game's soundtrack being up on YouTube and an All Bosses video from ShadowSurg back in like 2017. There's pretty much nothing on this game. Heck, I only got this game because it was $10 at a GameStop and I only had $15 on me, and 9-year-old me didn't think about things like saving up money for games you really want or any of that stuff. That mentality was a few years away. And to be perfectly honest, I've never seen a copy of this game again. Still, while the game is a pretty simple and straightforward game, it is one I had a lot of fun with as an enjoyable romp. Or at least it is if you can make it past the ridiculous wall that is the Dust Golem. The lead up to this one honestly isn't too long, as it's the second boss in the game, but basically we start by picking our character and taking a personality quiz that has very, very light determinations on our starting stats and will not really affect things in the long run. We meet with the Queen of the Nation Rubahat, who casually lets strangers into her castle and says, "Hey there, welcome new guy, here's a sword, go save the world." You can talk to the locals, and they talk about their great heroic knight Captain Rusio that's got a long prosperous life ahead of him, as well as a fiancé he's engaged to and a happy little sister who's waiting for him to come home. I'm sure everything will go well there. Then at the Abyss Gate there's Helen, who gives us a more of a proper rundown on our mission, and if this character looks at all familiar to you, it's probably because you recognize her from the Nintendo DSi game Anonymous Notes from the Abyss. It was a 4-episodic game that took the skeleton of this game, removed the town, and made it a dungeon crawling roguelike that was really dickish, and the difficulty differences between each episode was comedically unbalanced. But it was also on the Nintendo 3DS eShop as part of the DSiWare stuff, so if you were on the 3DS in the early days, you probably saw these games, or at least the first two, get advertised a fair bit. Then we head out to our grassy plains level and beat some enemies with a $15 Renaissance Fair sword that does pathetically weak damage, because we're going to need to get something better pretty soon. After that, we have our first boss fight against the Minotaur that can be beaten in one of two ways. The easy but long way, using a bow where you just outrange him, or the quick and dangerous way where you use literally any other weapon but actually have to dodge his attacks, but it's also probably the more fun way. You defeated the Minotaur? So did my brother. Yes, Sally, I'm sure he has a long and prosperous life ahead of him with his betrothed. Then we reach the second level of the game, the Waste Caverns, which is home to our subject of today's video, the Waste Vacuum Demon, Dust Golem, with an amazing pre-boss speech of, and I quote, "Goff, cough, cough, ugh, ga, cough, cough, cough." A very verbose and intellectual individual, I assure you. The Dust Golem is the second boss fight of the game, and he has only 3 attacks up his sleeve. A hammer arm that has a bit of a wind up, but hits hard and is guaranteed to stun you out of any attack you may be doing, while also being able to deal heavy counter damage if he hits you at just the wrong frame. He has a rock slide he can perform as a defensive action, where he casts a spell and then rocks start falling, but instead of everyone dying, it's just minor damage, but it makes it basically impossible to approach him as the rocks fall in random locations, so it's effectively a 5-second long get off me tool, at least in the first phase of the fight. And worst of all is his Rock Blast, which has him fire off 3 sets of 4 boulders and a bit of a fan pattern that hit for 50 to 60 damage, or about 1/5 of the average player's HP by this point, because you'll be around level 10 when you get here, even if you're fairly diligent killing enemies. Well, why is that attack so bad? Well, because of how this game works, it effectively can deal infinite damage. See, there's no invincibility frames after you get hit by a boss, but if an enemy was to perform something like a slash or shoot or a quick fireball, it hit you, you'd get knocked back for not even a split second, and you'd continue fighting. But these rocks are slow and are close to each other, so getting hit by a rock will knock you back, potentially into another rock, or maybe into the same rock, and while doing 50 to 60 damage isn't too bad, it becomes a serious problem when it hits you 3 times and half your health is gone, or it hits you 6 times and suddenly, oh, you're dead. Oh, and they phase through walls, so there's no hiding from the projectile, and they have infinite range. And while they can fire in straight lines, they can also angle and get wavy just for the fun of it, or turn into more of a fan pattern to make the fight a bit of a bullet hell. And on top of all that, this boss isn't a glass cannon by any means of the word, as he can take hits for days. Realistically, the best weapon you're going to have access to at this point in the game is the Rubinian Spear or the Steel Axe. The Rubinian Spear is the best weapon you can realistically buy in stores because everything else requires you to take out a mortgage to afford it this early in the game. Meanwhile, the Steel Axe is something you get from beating an early game boss, but it's very slow and has long recovery animations in the early game until you start working on weapon masteries. So the best weapon you have is probably the Rubinian Spear that's hitting for about 10 damage a hit on a boss with hundreds of HP knocking on the door of 1,000, and his attacks can hit you like a truck. Sure, you could spec into magic, but the only spell you can learn normally at this point is a basic fireball spell that hits the Dust Golem for an amazing 5 whole damage. Any other spells must be purchased from the store for a minimum of 1,000 Lufia a pop, which is a lot of money this early in the game. But no problem, we can always grind money from killing enemies. It's an RPG, that's how it works, right? Well, no, enemies only provide experience when killed, not money. The only exception is if they drop an item, which is usually something like a health potion or something that sells for not a whole lot and really you're better off holding on to. Or maybe you'll kill a kobold enemy that has about a 1 in 10 chance of dropping a copper ore that sells for 100 Lufia. So no, we are financially broke as hell this early in the game. You can maybe afford one spell of your choosing, so pick wisely. But you know, phase 1 isn't too bad. Just get in there, take hits when you can, and he has a brief cooldown after his attacks end. Phase 2 is not so nice. See, the animations of his attacks will speed up, which doesn't affect the hammer arm or rock slide too much. They are a little bit more dangerous, but it means he can just quick draw the rock bullets when you're recovering or in recovery frames and instantly blast you in the face with unreactable damage. Oh, and the rock blasts now fire in 3 sets of 6 projectiles instead of just 4. The rock slide also lasts a second longer, and now he can still attack you while the rocks are falling, meaning he can rev up some rocks to blast you in the face while stunning you from the ones dropping on top of your head, because projectiles don't care about elevation in this game. So if their sprite touches the target, then damage is taken. It's great for exploiting enemy AI, but it bites you in the ass here. But okay, what about dodging? Well, the only dodge you have available at this point in the game is a quick backdash, which is good at avoiding his hammer arm and good at avoiding something like the Minotaur's axe, but when his rock blast is a forward traveling projectile, you can see the problem here, I take it. But okay, what if we just dash on through him? That should give us an opportunity to get a back attack and avoid his bullets, right? Except nope, he can also fire the projectiles through his ass if he wants to. You see, the projectile and the palm thrust aren't one full-blown attack animation together. It's kind of weird. It's an animation the boss does that's tied to an attack where his projectiles spawn in from the location of his hand a short split second afterwards, and it targets your general location. This is a trick a lot of older sprite-based games would use because it's not something you notice in most games unless you have a way to suddenly trigger a quick burst of speed. Unfortunately for us, Gallop-Lance is an attack that triggers such a burst of speed, and it's probably the best way to deal damage to this boss because we don't start gaining ways to increase weapon proficiency until after this boss is killed. So how the hell are we supposed to beat this thing? Well, there's a few things you can do. For one, get every enemy skill you can up to this point, as each enemy has a unique skill they will provide the player. The most helpful is probably Gallop-Lance from the large troll enemies, as it allows you to do a lot of damage hitting the boss up to 4 times, as well as quickly move and pass right on through them, so if you're staying on the run, then that's a good option you have. There's also the Light Hill spell you can get from the zombie enemies, and it recovers about 50 or so HP, which doesn't sound like a ton, but considering it's only 10 SP to use, and you recover SP over time, as well as having SP potions, that can be helpful. Your third skill can be whatever you want. I personally like having it tied to my Tornado spell, but Fireball or anything else that suits your fancy from your limited options can work. Second, after you beat the Minotaur, talk to the boy in the plaza and he gives you your very first strong potion, which can recover 300 HP, which is a full heal this early on in the game. Third is to purchase whatever strong gear you can. If you're hurting for money, I recommend selling the steel axe you got from killing the Minotaur the first time. It gets you 600 Lufia, which can afford you some items, maybe a bit of equipment, and it gets you 60% of the way towards a spell, which isn't a crappy fireball at least. Third is, if you know this fight's coming, just focus on min-maxing your stats. Use your stat distributions and level up just attack and defense, because while magic is good, you don't really get any worthwhile attacking spells until after this boss is defeated. Unfortunately, there's no way to respec your stats in this game, so once you finalize it, level up, those stats are locked in, so yeah, have fun with that. Lastly, it is an RPG, so you can choose to grind levels, but enemies give pathetically low experience this early in the game. But bosses do respawn, so you can choose to fight the Minotaur over and over again for a somewhat decent experience grinding spot, and it gives you some pretty easy kills in the process. Think of it as revenge for all the hell he put you through in Shin Megami Tensei 4. This joke would have been a lot better if I'd already made an episode on this guy, but he's next week's episode, so stay tuned for that, I guess. Otherwise, the best advice I can give you...
Look, you just gotta try harder not to suck.
Once you have your favorite skills set, your best gear equipped, get ready for the fight of your life and be ready for a long battle. This is a marathon, not a sprint. In fact, my successful run lasted around 4.5 minutes. And that was a much faster kill than I've usually seen against this boss. In the first phase, you're pretty much golden, as after each attack, he has a long enough recovery animation you can easily hit him with a Gallop Lance that allows you to quickly dash across the screen and hit the opponent multiple times. A basic attack does about 10 damage to this guy. Gallop Lance usually does somewhere between 45 to 60 damage. It can make a huge difference when the boss is knocking on the door of 1000 HP. However, try to save at least 50 SP at all times, because you can perform any emergency heals or spells that you think you need should the need arise. Also, put all of your potions on a single page on the bottom screen of the DS and just be ready to use them if your health gets low. Don't try to slowly work your way back up. In Phase 1, it's risky. In Phase 2, it's just stupid. It's not uncommon that he can just take out 90% of your HP in a single hit. He probably won't one-shot you, but in Phase 2, his Rock Blast can easily hit you for around 230 damage total, if not more, which, yeah, that's gonna pretty much kill you. So don't screw with it. Speaking of Phase 2, listen closely, as you're not going to want to rely on his animations anymore, as they're unreliable, but instead you want to listen for his audio cue, because if he's going for a Hammer Arm or a Rock Blast, he'll make a grunting noise, so if you hear that, just run the hell away from him. His current direction, it gives you an extra half a second needed to probably avoid the rocks if they're being shot out, and that can make a difference. As for his Rock Slide attack, where he uses magic, well, it's a magic attack, which means he always has a magic circle appear around him, and it takes about 1.5 seconds before the rocks start falling, so it's actually the best time to try and get in a hit or two, because that move is almost purely defensive, and it's not a move that he has for dealing damage, it's more of a lore piece, as he's one of only 2 creatures we've seen in the game so far, or in the Abyss so far, capable of using magic, and it's a lot more powerful than a weak fireball spell that we got off the random imp monster we took out. Otherwise, the best advice I have is the same advice I have for a lot of hard bosses in action RPGs, and that's to just not get greedy, take it slowly, 1 or 2 hits at a time. It's better to take it slow and miss a possible damage window than it is to die and have to restart the whole fight from scratch, because there's no mid-boss checkpoints in this game. Hard to believe I actually like this game. But, to be fair, the story is interesting enough, and I think if you can get past this hurdle, you have another 75% of the game where the builds and options you have available just expand to astronomical levels. It was definitely a weird game that no one else around me had ever heard of, but it was a fun time aside from this one sticking point. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised Kid Me ever got past this fight, because Kid Me was really bad at video games. But either way, that's all I've got for this video. If you'd like to see more content of varying quality, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video. And I'll see you all in the next episode when we finally get to talking about the Minotaur from Shin Megami Tensei 4. No, I'm not kidding, I promise. Until then, take care. Okay, I'm not saying the developers intentionally made this boss fight absurdly difficult, but I'm just saying that the lady that assigned you this mission to come to this dungeon didn't think you'd be able to actually succeed.